Welcome back. P.S. I love you. She loves you. But probably more importantly, I want to hold your hand, are a lot more than words to a whole generation of Americans. It was 50 years ago today, Sergeant Pepper taught the band to play. It was actually 20, but we're saying 50 for the sake of this. And with me today is a professor and chair, music department at Skidmore College.
Hi, Jesse. How you doing?
Good, Gordon. How are you?
Good to be here.
It's great to see you again.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
Well, when I realized on Sunday night that it was the 50th anniversary of the Beatles' appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, and what a change that meant, not only for a generation of Americans, but what it meant to our culture, our music. I was thinking, what could we do here on Look TV? And you are a Beatles aficionado.
So it seems. I mean, and you're right. You know, this is the appearance of the Beatles on that February 9th, 1964 television show, the Ed Sullivan Show, really was a watershed in Western culture.
Yes.
It was this moment when I would argue, youth culture suddenly realized we have something to say, we have somebody that represents us, and we're ready to challenge the adults.
That's
and
right.
I think that's a very important moment. It's a signature moment in Western culture. And probably we wouldn't be sitting here now talking about it if it wasn't a signature moment.
You know, when they're talking about how just the convergence of so many things in our culture were happening at the same time. You know, when I opened the show, I mentioned I want to hold your hand. You know, there was more to it than just the song itself. That the fact that the president had been assassinated a few months earlier,
yeah.
and that the whole country needed to hold each other's hands. They needed a distraction.
Yeah, we were in deep emotional pits at that point in time. We both probably remember that afternoon watching the TV. For me, I remember the TV set. We were out for recess. We came in. The TV was in the classroom.
That's right.
We watched that afternoon. Watched the assassination information, challenging the question, saying, "How could this possibly be? How could this happen?" We go home that night. We watch television. Right, we watch the events unfolding and the details. We watch all through Saturday. On Sunday, we watch Jack Ruby murder Lee Harvey Oswald.
That's right.
And then Monday, we watch the funeral. We watch John Jr. saluting his father's casket.
I know.
I mean, just an incredible moment. And then we come up to February, and here are these guys that are just there to say, look, the world isn't so bad. It's a great place. There's lots to live for. And we don't take ourselves that seriously, and there's fun in life.
You know, and there were so many aspects to what they introduced us to that were so different at the time. Everything from the haircuts to the Beatle boots to the suits and whatever. But you know, one thing always struck me about that, early on, everyone wanted to dismiss them as a fad. Remember?
Yeah. Oh.
I remember my grandfather saying, they can't sing to save their life. And it was so much more important to us. But I remember Leonard Bernstein had said something, if you analyze the chords of I Want to Hold Your Hand, that the intervals of the chords were different than anybody had heard.
Well, Leonard Bernstein thought people were complaining, saying the Beatles are terrible. And he says, no, hold back. I think the Beatles are actually pretty good.
That's right.
He thought people were saying, a lot of the critics at the time, you read reviews in the paper, the Boston Globe and all the New York Times and all these papers were saying, well, the music's not very good, not very sophisticated, not very complicated. These people can't play music. I think, on the other hand, they were all proven wrong.
Well, they're certainly proven wrong. And something about them, too, as we evolved, they evolved. You know, their songs, I remember when Rubber Soul came out, it was like, oh my God, this band that apparently people had written off to some degree as a pop band, were all of a sudden doing some very serious folk music.
What they did was, the Beatles were very good at this one particular thing. They were always on the crest of the wave of change.
That's right.
They always figured out, they were always trying to guess what the next big thing was going to be. And invariably it turned out to be them.
That's
right.
But
they were vacuum cleaners of culture. They would listen to music, whether it was Bob Dylan, right? Where they got the ideas for, Hide Your Love Away and things like that, to, soul, listening to Wilson Pickett, Sam and Dave, Hold On, I'm Coming. There are outtakes of them in the studio practicing and playing that song.
That's right.
And then you get those chords reappearing in Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
That's right.
It doesn't sound like Sam and Dave anymore. They've repackaged it and given it back to us, but they've got the core of the idea. They rode the crest of that wave of cultural change all the way through the 60s. And the 60s were an incredible period for cultural change.
Right, one of the phenomenons of all societies of all time. And just when you thought that they couldn't outdo themselves, they released Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which I don't know about you, but it took everybody's head off. No one had ever explored music to that depth.
It certainly caught a lot of people by surprise. I mean, but it shouldn't have. If you think about what they did on Rubber Soul, and then Revolver,
right.
and then Sgt. Pepper's, it's like, this is a kind of a logical development. They're just pushing the envelope each time, expanding what that vocabulary of musical ideas, whether it's clavichords on Revolver or French horns.
That's right.
They're always exploring new sounds, and then Sgt. Pepper was really kind of like the culmination of that, saying, this is where we can go with this.
We need to do one quick sidebar to mention George Martin, because George Martin, who was their producer and also a brilliant orchestrator and arranger, was really the fifth Beatle.
Well, whatever the fifth Beatle is,
That's
he
right.
certainly would qualify.
Yeah, you're right.
He's the guy that was there adding things to them. Even on the first album, they do a tune "Misery" on their very first album. They recorded in the studio, and then he comes in afterwards and says, this needs some piano. So they're out on the road, and he adds piano to it afterwards.
Right.
And it really does kind of add to that tune. And he'll do that with a lot of other tunes. Baby, It's You, right? It'll be that. He'll be adding piano and what was it, celeste to that recording, right? So he's there really adding and shaping. But George Martin also admits that early on, he was the one who was telling them and showing them how to do it. And then later on, he was the one facilitating them.
That's right. That the more that had this insatiable curiosity about instruments and arrangements and what they could do.
Right.
So look, as professor and chair of the music department, and this love you have for this music and your understanding of how it affected culture, you went to the board at Skidmore and said, I'm going to do courses on
it doesn't work like that. I know people have this image that education is, and certainly is in many levels, bureaucratic. But no, we had a seminar that was allowed us to kind of add different kinds of topics, right? And so I had this floating topic came up, and I said, well, I said to the department chair, I think I'd like to do a course on the Beatles. And he said, well, why not? So that's what he did. I just did a seminar on the Beatles. So the opening one, actually I got some advice from colleagues out on the internet. I said, anybody else doing a course like that? No. What would you do in this course? Well, I do this, this, and this. Well, what I ended up doing was having them compare biographies. There's always, we both know, there's lots of biographies of the Beatles. But they all say different things about things. Where's the haircut come from? Where's the name come from? What's the role of Yoko Ono? Each of them has its own particular spin on what happened. So get students to realize that history is in the eyes of the historian, right? And each historian is going to spin that story differently.
And this is one story to tell. Now you're taking the show on the road.
Well,
I understand that you're doing lectures.
We've been doing this through the Egg. We've been in Schenectady and Albany and Guilderland and Clifton Park, last night in Troy, tonight in Saratoga Springs, Glens Falls tomorrow night, and then Bethlehem. And that'll be the end of this part of the tour. And then I'll be at Union College on the 24th, and then in Philadelphia on the 28th, I think. So.
Right, and that's 7 o'clock tonight at the Saratoga Library.
7:30
tonight, and 7 o'clock tomorrow night at Crandall. And this is something that I encourage people of all ages to witness. This is a story that will never end.
It's a great thing, because one of the things that's been going on is that people have been showing up at these. I had a great thing happen the other day. I was in Clifton Park, and this woman stands up in the middle of during the Q&A, and she says, well, I watched them on TV, and she reaches in her pocket, and she's got an envelope, and it's full of photos she took of the TV set on February 9th. But better, it gets better. She comes up afterwards, and she says to me, well, do you think that John Lennon ever met Ellie Greenwich, who the songwriter?
That's right.
And I said, well, I don't know. I know that Lennon and McCartney really liked their songwriting. She says, well, because when I met John, I met him at Ellie Greenwich's mother's. And I said, whoa, hold on here. Right? You met John Lennon. When was this? She says, 1964, Levittown. And then it gets better. She says, yeah, and I got his autograph. And she reaches into her pocket, and she's got a piece of paper with John Lennon's autograph. It's like, people show up at these things. Again, it goes back to this idea that February 9th concert as being a signature moment in Western culture. People, it's like the mountain in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
That's right.
They don't know why they need to be there, but they show up because they want to be there. They feel they have to be there.
Gordon, thank you so much for coming in.
Great.
You can count on me being in the front row.
Excellent.
I'll tell you that. And please, I encourage you all to go to the library tonight or tomorrow night if you're in Saratoga and Glens Falls and see this. And to see the interview for a second time and all our interviews, head to the website looktvonline.com.